A call. "Hold on," she said. "I'll just run out and get him. The weather here's so good he took the chance to do a bit of weeding." So I saw him, down on his hands and knees beside the leak rig, touching, inspecting, separating one stalk from the other, gently pulling up everything not tapered, frail and leafless, pleased to feel each little weed root break, but rueful also. Then found myself listening to the amplified, grave ticking of hall clocks, where the phone lay unattended in a calm of mirrored glass and sun-struck pendulums, and found myself then thinking, if it were nowadays, this is how death would summon every man. Next thing he spoke, and I nearly said I loved him. Again, like other poems that he's written on our course, this is about a real-life incident where Heaney calls his dad. It's his father he wants to speak to, not his mother, because his mother is the speaker here. So, "Hold on," she said, "I'll just run out and get him. The weather's so good he took the chance to do a bit of weeding." So you've got this image or situation that's very mundane, certainly in those days, because people would have done a lot of gardening, and his father obviously was a keen gardener, and certainly Seamus Heaney was himself. So he's out, and Heaney imagines him in his head. He imagines him here, looking at each of the weeds and the plants, and he inspects each of the little shoots that are coming up, each one, and you can see it's almost gentle here. Well, it is gentle. It's totally touching, inspecting, separating one stalk from the other, gently pulling up everything not tapered, frail and leafless, pleased to feel each little weed root break, but rueful also. So the father here has the power over the life and death of each plant. Obviously, some plants are weeds, so he plucks them up and he removes them. Some are plants that are simply not growing. They're frail, they're leafless, they're not going to grow, they're just going to slow down the surrounding plants, so they have to be removed and thinned out. The image that I chose there is good because you've got what you can see, the hand there is pulling out the thinner of the two stalks, and I don't know what that is. It looks a bit like a potato, but he's pulling that out and leaving the good one behind. So the strong and the healthy are left behind. So the father is there, and he imagines, because obviously he has to imagine this, he's pleased to feel each weed root break, and it is good when you're pulling up weeds and to feel the whole weed root come out of the soil, because then you know it can't grow again. But also rueful, right there. He's rueful also, because he's in a way sorry to be ripping up plants from the soil that he's working in. So then Heaney is left behind. Now, I suppose it's important to realise that the phone that he calls him on is a phone like this. It's a phone that would have been stationed inside the hall. There was no chance of moving it. It was plugged into the wall, and that was that. So as his mum goes off to get his father, he can hear through the receiver the sound of clocks ticking in the hall. And of course, clocks are a symbol of death. I've included this image here. It's probably a little modern, but what's good about this is that the sun is shining in on the mirror, and there's obviously no phone there, but you get the idea, whatever way the Heaney's hall would have looked like. So he finds himself, and he's listening to the amplified, grave ticking of the hall clocks. Now, I think the word here that's important is the word grave, because this is actually a poem, not so much about a phone call, but a poem about death. He talks here, the phone lay unattended in a calm of mirrored glass and sun-struck pendulums. So it's a beautiful day, and the sun is shining in, and the clocks are pendulum. The pendulum, there's movement here. So it's simply moving left and right, on and on, on and on. And then what you get here is an ellipsis, 3 dots, in which time is passing. That's the punctuation to say time has passed. And Heaney finds himself thinking, and actually get himself into a bit of a state. He's thinking that if it were nowadays, this is how death would summon every man. Now, like some of the other poems, you need to understand what that means. Sorry. So I've included this image here, this rather grotesque medieval. It's not from the play Everyman, but the play Everyman is a figure in this medieval play where he's meant to represent every man, an ordinary person, but at some point death does come from. And in one line in particular, Death says to every man, "In great haste I am sent to thee from God out of his majesty." And every man is horrified. "What? Sent to me?" And Death says, "Yea, certainly. Though thou have forgot him here, he thinketh on thee in the heavenly sphere." So, death comes for everybody. And Heaney is maybe being a bit playful here about such a grim topic, but he's thinking if it was nowadays, death wouldn't bother coming all bony and grim. He'd just pick up the phone and he'd say, "It's you." Nowadays he'd set up a WhatsApp group. But this is how death would summon every man. And so Heaney, in the moments that he's got between his mother reaching his father and his father coming back on the phone, he thinks about life and death. He thinks about what death does. Death does this. It touches, inspects, separates one stalk from the other, and he personifies it. He'd like to think that this is what death does, that he takes people and he's pleased to feel certain people go, but also sorry. So his father is a sort of a personification of a death figure. And then I find the end of this poem a little troubling. The next thing he spoke, and I nearly said, "I loved him." Now, in those lines, I think there's a multitude of meaning. And my question is, well, why the heck did you not say you loved him? Why wouldn't you say those 3 words? He probably went on talking about the weather. The weather's grand. What are you doing? I'm weeding. And my question is, why didn't he say? So it could be a comment on the relationship between father and son. It could be a comment on masculinity, about not being able to express your feelings. And it certainly expresses a fear of death and the unknown and what must happen to every man, including his father.